The soft chime of my tea kettle was the only sound in the apartment. Outside, the late April wind moved through the magnolia trees, scattering petals across the windowsill like confetti. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand resting over my pregnant belly, the other holding the rim of a ceramic mug I'd bought the day we found out we were expecting a pale cream glaze, cracked at the lip, but still my favorite. My name is Elena, and I'm 38 years old. I used to think I knew how a story like mine would unfold, that I would see it coming, feel it like a storm in my bones. But the truth is, betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up as an open browser tab quietly blinking. That night, I only meant to order vitamins. I clicked open my husband's laptop to check the delivery tracker. His was already logged in, and what blinked back at me wasn't a shopping cart. It was an email. Subject: can't wait for the weekend, the heart. That small red icon didn't belong in our marriage anymore. Not in the subject line of an email he'd received at 4:12 p.m., just after he told me he was stuck in a meeting and might be late. I didn't click it, not right away. Instead, I stared at it frozen as the water hissed behind me. My hand moved without thinking, turning off the stove, and I sat down slowly at the kitchen island. The stool creaked beneath me, familiar and solid in a world that suddenly wasn't. The email was from Danielle. I knew the name. Everyone at his firm did his assistant 2 years younger than me, always perfectly put together. She had this easy confidence, a kind of practiced softness that made her seem harmless. Now all I could see was that subject line. I clicked. Inside it was short, too short. Can't wait for the weekend. Got the cabin booked. Just us this time. Pack something warm, I know you get cold. Just us, this time. I sat still for a long moment, feeling the air change. It was like the walls of our condo, so carefully decorated with framed wedding photos and soft rugs, had grown unfamiliar. Too quiet, too curated. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I pulled my hand away from the mouse and folded it over my stomach again. The baby kicked one slight fluttery, like it didn't know anything yet, like it still believed the world was safe. And maybe that was the worst part. Later that night, I watched him walk through the front door like nothing had changed. His jacket slung over his shoulder tie loosened. He kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes and complimented the chicken I hadn't cooked. I picked up takeout, I said quietly, pouring a glass of water. He smiled like I'd done him a kindness. You always know what I need. I wanted to ask him, right there. I wanted to throw the laptop at him, demand answers, rip the quiet out of the room like a scream, but I didn't. Instead, I listened to him talk about traffic, about the client pitch, about some intern's mistake. And I nodded and said things like, oh, and really, while my hand pressed again to my belly, feeling the steady rhythm of life inside me. Because something in me had shifted, something cold, precise, and silent. That night, after he'd fallen asleep beside me, snoring softly like he always did when he drank too much wine, I turned over in bed and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't the woman who exploded. I never had been. I was the woman who watched, who waited. I remembered a line from a book I read once: some betrayals are cut with the edge of silence. I never understood it before, but now I did. The next morning, I texted his assistant. Hi Danielle, just wondering if I left my scarf in James's office the other day. I was in and out quickly, may have dropped it. Thanks, she replied too quickly. Hey, didn't see anything but I'll check. Hope you're staying warm. Another heart. Another lie. I stared at the message and realized something: she wasn't just careless. She was confident. Confident that I would stay in the shadows of this thing. That I would hold on to politeness, onto silence, onto the illusion of security that I'd worn like a second skin for years. And maybe before that email she would have been right, but not now. Now I felt something inside me uncoil. Not rage, not yet. Just a kind of sharpness. The kind you only get when there's something worth protecting. That night I opened a blank folder on my personal laptop and titled it simply Tuesday. Inside I saved the email, then the text message. Then I took a screenshot of his calendar from that week, Friday through Sunday, blocked off. No meetings, just out of office. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I'd need proof. There was a photo on our mantel. I stared at it before bed. One of those carefully posed vacation shots. He had his hand on my waist. I was in a white sundress, the Charleston skyline behind us. We looked happy, but now I saw it differently. Now the skyline didn't look like memory. It looked like escape. And just like that, I started planning. because the first time someone lies to you, it's a warning. The second time, it's a choice. And I had no intention of waiting for a third. But the next morning, I heard something in his office that changed everything. A laugh. Not his, not mine. There's a kind of laugh that doesn't belong to friendship. It's too close to a whisper. Too full of secrets. I heard it when I brought him lunch. The paper bag crinkled softly in my hand as I stepped off the elevator, heart-steady movements casual. My feet carried me down the hall lined with steel and frosted glass, past a pair of interns whispering near the water cooler. One looked up and smiled awkwardly. I nodded. I didn't come here to catch anything. I came because I wanted to see. James hadn't been answering my texts all morning. His meeting schedule didn't match what he'd told me over breakfast. And I'd woken up to the faint scent of perfume. On the collar of the dress shirt he left in the bathroom suite, not mine. Something floral. I told myself it was stress, that I was being paranoid. But when I reached his door, I stopped short, because I heard her laugh, light, breathy, floating through the cracked glass like it had been waiting to be caught. Then his voice lower, amused. You're unbelievable. And then, quiet. Not the silence of work, but the kind of stillness that follows a touch. I didn't knock. I turned around, walked back down the hall like I'd forgotten something. Like my hands weren't shaking slightly against the paper bag, now folded tighter in my grip. In the lobby, I tossed it into the trash. Sat in my car for 20 minutes with the windows cracked, staring out at the Charleston skyline, like it might offer answers. It looked different in the daylight, silver gray and soft blue against the clouds. Cold. I checked my phone. No messages. He wasn't going to explain the laugh. He didn't think I heard it. Maybe he didn't even know he'd smiled like that. But I did. And something about that smile, warm and private, set a slow fire in my chest. I drove to the shoreline after that, found a quiet place near Folly Beach, and stood with my toes in the cool sand shoes still in hand. The wind tugged gently at my sweater, and somewhere behind me a father called out to his child. But I stayed still, hand on my stomach, eyes on the horizon. I wasn't sure what I was mourning yet. That evening he came home with flowers, just because he said, smiling like nothing had happened. I saw these and thought of you, lilies, my least favorite, but I smiled anyway. Let him put them in a vase. He kissed the top of my head, asked what I wanted for dinner. We settled on leftovers. He poured a glass of wine for himself, water for me, and talked about the board meeting that hadn't happened. I listened, let him lie, and I memorized it all. After he fell asleep, I crept out of bed and opened the bedroom closet. At the back, tucked in a box of old holiday decorations, I found what I was looking for. An old notebook I used to keep before we were married. A journal of sorts. Scribbled recipes, things I wanted to remember, passwords I could never quite retain. Now it would become something else. On the first blank page I wrote, date April 16, subject Danielle, laugh behind office door. Observation, familiarity, flirtation, possibly physical. Then I closed it and went back to bed. I woke the next morning to find him already dressed. Suit jacket over one arm, phone tucked between shoulder and cheek. Yeah, I'll see you at 9, he said, voice light. Just bring the notes. We'll go over it before the meeting. Then a pause, a low chuckle. He didn't see me watching. Yep, that laugh. Dangerous, he said. Smirking at nothing. All right, see you soon. He hung up and turned. Hey babe, he said, kissing me on the temple. Didn't wake you, did I? No, I whispered. Just up early. He didn't notice the change in my eyes, or if he did, he looked past it. That afternoon, I called my sister. I didn't tell her anything, not yet. Just asked how her girls were doing, how school pickup was going, how the spring weather was treating them out in Greenville. And then halfway through the conversation, I asked quietly, have you ever been absolutely sure someone was lying to you? There was a pause. She didn't ask me why. She just said, yeah. And it's worse when they smile while they do it. That night, he didn't come home until almost 11. He said the client dinner ran long, that his phone died, that Danielle had offered to drop him at the parking garage since she was headed that way. I just nodded, told him to plug in his phone, but I watched him charge it, watched the notification light blink. 3 missed texts, 1 email, and something else, an image half lit on the lock screen. Her name. A photo I couldn't see clearly. He turned it off quickly, said it was nothing. I wrote again that night. Date April 17, subject client dinner, excuse notes. Phone not dead. Danielle's name on lock screen. Image blurred but intimate posture, smiling. In the hallway mirror, I stared at myself afterward. My reflection looked calm. Same brown hair, same faint lines around my eyes, same soft gray nightshirt I always wore. But something behind my eyes had shifted. Not panic, not grief, calculation. It was a quiet power, but I could feel it building. Not because I was angry, but because I had something to protect. And if I was going to protect it, I had to be smarter, quieter, stronger. The next day I went to his office again. This time I didn't bring lunch. I brought a small envelope. Inside was nothing but a note. Let me know if you find that scarf. I'd hate to lose something I once wore so close. I handed it to the receptionist, asked her to give it directly to Danielle, smiled, waited. 10 minutes later, she came down the hallway. Blonde hair, 2 perfect heels, sharp against the tile. She looked around, saw me sitting by the window. Her eyes flickered. I didn't wave. She turned and walked the other way. Something about that moment burned like fire, because I knew then she wasn't afraid of me. She was amused by me, and that was her first mistake. But it wouldn't be her last. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead as I stood near the end of the corridor just past the copy room, out of sight. The carpet beneath my flats muffled every step, and the whole floor had that evening hush when most had gone home, but the important ones stayed behind. I wasn't supposed to be here, not officially, but I'd waited, watched, planned. That evening, the firm hosted a client dinner downtown. I'd called the restaurant hours before to confirm James was there. He wasn't, not on the list. So I came here. The building security guard knew me, smiled when I waved. He didn't ask questions. After all, I was the wife. And wives don't snoop. Wives drop off files, bring forgotten chargers, leave sweet notes. I did none of those things. I just stood at the end of the hallway, still and silent, staring through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my husband's corner office. And I saw them. He was sitting back in his leather chair, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. She stood beside him, laughing about something he had just said, her hand brushing lightly along his shoulder. Not a flirty brush. An intimate one. Her fingers lingered. He didn't pull away. The desk lamp cast a soft amber halo over them. His laptop screen glowed, half illuminating her profile as she leaned over, pointing at something. But neither of them looked at the screen. And then she sat on the edge of his desk, legs crossed. He reached for her hand. That was all. That's all I needed. I didn't gasp, I didn't cry. I simply reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and took one photograph. Through the glass, with my hand steady. I didn't walk in. I turned around. Walked back the same way I came, passing the vending machine that had once eaten his credit card on a late night I'd brought him coffee. The same vending machine where I had laughed once before everything shifted. By the time I reached the elevator, my throat felt tight. Not with heartbreak, with clarity. In the parking lot, I sat in the car again. This time, I didn't look at the skyline. I looked at the photo. It wasn't scandalous. No kissing, no obvious touch, just energy. A magnetic closeness that people try to explain away when they're caught. A hand too close, a look too familiar. But anyone who's ever been loved knows the difference. And anyone who's ever been betrayed recognizes the silence between two people who no longer feel the need to hide it. That night, I didn't speak when he came home. He was flushed from the wine he didn't drink with clients. Loosened collar lips curved into a soft, tired smile. Long night, he said, brushing past me to hang up his coat. I replied, pouring tea. Everything go okay, yeah, he said too easily. Dinner went well. I'll probably need to follow up on some of it tomorrow, but nothing urgent. I didn't answer. He noticed. You okay? He asked, frowning now. You seem quiet. I turned to him, met his eyes, smiled gently. I'm just tired, I said. Long day. He came over, kissed my cheek again. That same spot. That same script. I leaned into it. Because I wasn't ready to show him what I knew. Not yet. Later, I updated the folder on my laptop. The one labeled Tuesday. I created a new subfolder, Office Sightings. I uploaded the photo, then I made a backup. 2, actually. I labeled them carefully. Because when you're preparing for war that no one knows, they started you catalog your weapons in silence. Before bed, I lit a candle. The smell of lavender filled the room, soft and steady. I sat on the edge of the bed in my nightgown, brushing out my hair slowly the way I used to when we first got married. Back then, he would watch me from the doorway. Now he scrolled through his phone. The screen lit his face in flickers. I watched his expression serene, distracted, smiling once. She was texting him. I knew it, but I didn't ask, and he didn't offer. A part of me wanted to scream, to drag the phone from his hands, throw it against the wall, shout, "Do you think I'm stupid?" But I didn't, because something in me was done trying to fix things. I didn't want to fix this. I wanted to finish it. The next morning, he left early, said he had to prep for a call with West Coast partners. I nodded from the kitchen table, eating oatmeal I could barely taste. Once he was gone, I pulled out the journal again. Date April 18th entry. Observed physical closeness between James and Danielle. Office. After hours. Approx. 7:12 p.m. Witnessed prolonged gaze, shoulder touch, desk proximity. Took photo evidence. Subject unaware. I closed the book slowly, fingers lingering on the cover, and then I opened a new tab on my laptop. Search discreet private investigator Charleston SC. I clicked the third link, filled out the form, used a burner email, just in case. Around noon, my sister called. I didn't mention anything, but she heard the quiet in my voice. "Elena," she said gently. "Are you okay?" I almost said yes, then paused. "I think something's wrong," I whispered. She was silent for a beat. "Then with the baby," I said quickly, "not the baby." And then I lied. "I'm just tired." But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was, I felt more awake than I had in months. Because now I wasn't waiting, I wasn't guessing, I was watching, and I knew something he didn't. I already had his signature on everything that mattered. The last will, the trust, the access. His mother's funeral had brought pain, yes, but also clarity, and in her final weeks she had given me more than a goodbye. She had given me leverage, but that part of the story, that part comes next. The morning air was soft when I stepped outside, a low fog curling around the street lamps like silk. Charleston in late April had a way of smelling like memory-wet brick jasmine, the quiet hush of something about to change. I wore flats, a long beige cardigan, and my wedding ring. Not because I believed in it anymore, but because I knew what people expected to see. The law office was in an old restored house just off Broad Street. Painted white with black shutters, it looked like it should have held antique maps and bourbon, not hard truths. I sat across from a woman named Marla Grant. She was mid-40s, direct, kind eyes behind steel-framed glasses. Her office smelled like paper and eucalyptus. No photos on the desk, just files arranged with surgical care. She didn't ask why I was there. Not at first. I handed her the folder I'd printed that morning. A few screenshots, calendar events. The photo I'd taken through the office glass. She flipped through everything in silence. When she finally looked up, she said only this. "Have you told him?" I shook my head. "Not yet." "Good," she said gently. "Don't." We talked for an hour. I told her about the emails, the late nights, the strange charges on our shared card dinners. He claimed we're with clients, but the timestamps didn't match. I told her about Danielle, though I never once used the word affair. I didn't need to. She understood. But more importantly, she knew what came next. She laid it out calmly in that quietly powerful tone only lawyers and surgeons seem to master. "What you need," she said, "is a record, not a suspicion. If this does become a custody issue, a financial division, emotional pain doesn't carry weight. Documentation does." I nodded, taking notes, even though I knew I'd remember every word. Then she leaned in slightly, voice lowering. "Elena, I want to be clear about something. If you decide to confront him, do it only after we've secured your position. Emotion can come later. Right now, you need strategy." When I left her office, the fog had lifted. The air felt sharper, like something had been peeled back. I didn't feel stronger, but I did feel ready. That night, I said nothing. He came home late again, holding a half-empty paper cup of coffee. Said he'd been walking the budget guys through revisions. I nodded. Offered to heat up leftovers. He declined. Said he wasn't hungry. I watched him from the hallway as he loosened his tie and sat down on the couch. His eyes looked tired, but not troubled. Whatever guilt I once hoped he'd feel wasn't there. And maybe that was my final confirmation. Not the emails, not the laughter, not even the photo. It was his ease. Like I was no longer a risk, no longer awake. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop and created a new folder inside the one I'd labeled Tuesday. Subfolder legal prep inside. I scanned the retainer agreement Marla had emailed. She'd be working quietly in the background, checking on our assets, preparing for a possible separation agreement. Everything would be timed, measured, undeniable. 2 days later, I made a second appointment, this time with a financial advisor Marla recommended. The meeting was in a downtown high-rise, with cold glass windows and the scent of espresso floating from the hallway. I wore my wedding ring again. Her name was Althea. Early 50s hair, pulled tight lipstick, flawless. She didn't blink when I told her why I was there. Joint accounts, she asked. Yes. Does he handle most of the investments? I hesitated, then nodded. He always liked control. She smiled faintly, like she'd heard that before. Let's start by understanding your standing, she said. Not just emotionally, legally. Back at home, James was starting to notice my quiet. Everything okay? He asked over dinner. You've been kind of distant lately, I shrugged. Hormones, probably, he smiled. Well, I hope you're not tired of me yet. Then he laughed. I smiled too, tucked my hair behind my ear, and replied, Oh, you'd know if I was. That night I found something else. A hotel reservation. Hilton Head. Weekend after next. Booked under his name. 2 guests. Paid in advance. I copied it, saved the confirmation number, printed it, then deleted the browser history. The next morning I called Marla. It's time, I said quietly. She didn't ask what I meant. She just replied, Understood, I'll proceed. What people don't tell you about betrayal is this. It doesn't hurt all at once. It's quiet. It unfolds in layers like paper being peeled back. What starts as confusion becomes suspicion, then grief, then finally clarity. And clarity, when it arrives, isn't loud. It's cold, precise, final. That evening I sat at the kitchen table alone. The baby moved again, soft, fluttery. I rested my hand, their fingers splayed gently. This child, this life, would not be born into dishonesty. Not if I could help it. And as I sat there, I thought about his mother, the way she'd looked at me in those final weeks. Her voice, brittle breath shortened by illness, but her eyes still clear. You're the only woman I've ever trusted with him, she'd said once. But don't you dare forget who you are. At the time, I thought it was her way of asking me to hold him up. Now I understood. She wasn't asking me to protect him. She was preparing me to leave him. There was something else she'd given me, something he didn't know about. A sealed envelope. I hadn't opened it, not yet. It had my name on it in her handwriting, and it had come with the will. Tomorrow, I would open it. Because the legal work had begun. The documents were moving, and so was I. But what I found inside that envelope shifted everything. The envelope was heavier than it looked. It had been resting inside the cedar chest in our bedroom closet since the day of her memorial, untouched, waiting. I'd walked past it dozens of times, always telling myself, not today. But this morning felt different. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a long decision, the kind that doesn't ask for confirmation anymore. I sat at the edge of our bed, knees pressed together, the morning light casting soft golden lines across the comforter. The envelope sat in my hands like a secret already breathing. Her handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, slanted to the right, like she was always leaning forward with something to say. Elena, private. I ran my thumb under the flap. It came open cleanly, no tearing, no resistance. Inside was a letter folded neatly, and beneath that, legal papers. But I read the letter first. Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here. And I need to say some things while I still can, in a way that's clean and quiet, without anyone interrupting. You were never just my daughter-in-law. You were my balance. The steadiness James never had in him. He's always been fire, charming, reckless, clever, but too quick to chase the next thing. You were the one who kept things steady. You grounded him. I hoped it would last. But if it hasn't, then I need you to know this. I changed my will. James doesn't know. No one does. But my shares in the family trust now go to you and your child. I did this because I saw something in your eyes that I never saw in his. A stillness that doesn't break when the storm comes. If he's failed you, don't let that failure define you. Use what I've left behind to make something better. You're stronger than you think. I saw it long before he did. Love always, Margaret. I don't remember how long I sat there. The room was still. The baby shifted once as if reacting to the weight I suddenly carried. Then I opened the second sheet. Legal, notarized, dated just 6 weeks before she passed. Margaret Grant had transferred full voting rights of her shares, just under 12% of the family firm, to me, to be held in my name and in trust for my child. It was signed, witnessed, complete, and completely unknown to James. That afternoon I called Marla. She picked up on the second ring. "I have something," I said. She didn't ask what, just told me to come in. When I handed her the envelope, she read in silence, then leaned back in her chair with a slow breath. "Elena," she said softly, "this changes everything." The next few hours were a blur of notarized copies, new account setups, and discussions about contingency plans. Marla spoke calmly, efficiently, but I caught the shift in her posture. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. It was about power. If the firm tried to retaliate, or if James tried to manipulate custody or finances, we had leverage, clean leverage, and most importantly, documented leverage. That evening, James was in the living room watching a basketball game. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. The way he leaned back in the chair, beer in one hand, eyes half-lidded with comfort. He had no idea. No idea that the ground beneath him had shifted, that his mother had trusted me more than him, that I held the deciding vote in any company matter involving the family trust. I walked past him, brushing my fingers lightly along his shoulder. He smiled. "Hey, baby, hey," I whispered, pressing a soft kiss to his temple. "Everything good, perfect," he murmured. I just nodded, because now it was. Later that night, I opened my laptop. Folder Tuesday, subfolder, Legal Prep. I created a new document, Title Trust Transfer, April 22nd. Subject: verified transfer of 12% ownership. Filed, copied, secured. I added a line, Margaret's vote, else Elena's decision. Then I leaned back and let the silence settle around me. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about removal, about understanding that something was dying and that I wouldn't try to revive it. That night I dreamed of a hallway, long, white, silent. At the end stood Margaret. She wore the same navy blazer she'd worn the last time we had coffee together, just before her diagnosis worsened. Her hands were folded, her expression calm. "You know what to do," she said simply. I nodded in the dream. And when I woke, I remembered how steady her eyes had been in real life, even when her hands trembled. The next morning, James kissed my shoulder while I made breakfast. "You're glowing today," he said with a grin. "Sleep okay?" I turned to him, smiled back. Better than ever. He didn't notice the stack of papers tucked behind the coffee machine. And I didn't offer to move them, because now I didn't need his permission. Not for the trust, not for my future, not even for my silence. But I still needed one more thing before I acted. I needed to know how far she would go, Danielle, because power without proof is still vulnerable. And the next time I saw her, I made her believe I didn't know. The gala invitation arrived on ivory cardstock, hand-delivered to our door by a junior associate with a clipboard and an eager smile. "Mrs. Grant," he said brightly. "Mr. Carmichael wanted to extend this personally. It's the firm's 10th anniversary, formal catered black tie." I thanked him, smiled and closed the door gently. The moment I turned the lock, I felt the breath I'd been holding settle back into my chest. The firm, his world, and hers. I set the envelope down on the kitchen counter, next to the bowl of lemons I always kept full, even though I rarely used them. Appearance, order, ritual. That night over dinner, James brought it up casually. "Would mean a lot if you came," he said. "People love seeing us together." I looked at him, shirt rolled up at the sleeves, phone, face down next to his wine glass. "Of course," I said, quiet and even. I wouldn't miss it. The evening of the gala, I dressed slowly. I wore a steel gray silk gown with long sleeves that hugged the quiet curve of my stomach. Simple earrings, hair pulled back into a low chignon. No perfume, just lavender oil behind my ears. When I stepped into the foyer, James looked up from tying his cufflinks. "You look stunning," he said. I smiled. "Thank you." He reached for my hand and I let him take it. Because tonight I wasn't here as his wife. I was here as a witness. The ballroom at the Charleston Grand was all soft uplighting and glass chandeliers. Gold-rimmed glasses shimmered on every table. The air buzzed with the expensive hush of boardroom laughter and quiet ambition. I recognized faces, board members, junior partners, Names I'd learned and filed away during my years of being the supportive wife. But none of them mattered, because at the far end of the room, standing beneath a pale spray of orchids and smiling too easily, was Danielle. Her dress was red, not a deep burgundy, not soft, red. The kind of red that says, "I belong here." And when her eyes caught mine across the room, she didn't flinch. She walked over slowly, heels measured on the marble. "Elena," she said, bright and cool, "you look beautiful." Her voice held just enough warmth to pass as harmless, but not too much. She'd perfected it. "So do you," I said calmly. "Red suits you." A flicker of pride crossed her face. "James said you might not come." I tilted my head. "Really? That's strange. He knows I never miss the ones that matter." Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. I sipped my water, let her stand there waiting for something: approval, permission, fear. I offered her none. Later that evening, while James chatted with the CFO near the bar, I made my way to the photo wall. A backdrop of gold sequins, a photographer snapping shots of couples and colleagues. Danielle stood alone, fixing her lipstick in the mirror just off to the side. I stepped next to her. She glanced at me in the reflection, the tip of her lipstick frozen mid-air. "He's always had a thing for red," I said softly. She blinked, laughed once like I'd made a joke. I turned to face her fully. "But you already know that." There was a pause. The kind where everything slows just for a second. Then I smiled. "Have a good night, Danielle." I left her standing there. Back home, after James had passed out from too many glasses of champagne, I opened my laptop and updated the journal. Date April 24th. Subject: gala behavior. Observation: Danielle's dress choice intentional. Public interaction with James frequent. Touches on arm. Private glances. No boundaries maintained in professional setting. Confident posture. Entry notes. Danielle shows no fear. Believes I know nothing. Believes I'm irrelevant. That belief will become her blind spot. Around 1 a.m., I woke to the soft buzz of James's phone. He was asleep, one arm thrown over his face, breath deep and slow. The screen was still on. Danielle still thinking about tonight. Can't sleep. No response yet from him. But the message sat there, waiting, heavy. I took a photo, then another, then opened my email, drafted a new folder. Subject: after hours messages. Attachment: gala, night 1. JPG. The next morning, he barely remembered coming home. "You looked amazing last night," he mumbled, pouring coffee. "Thanks," I said. "We should do more nights like that." "Maybe," I replied. "But some nights are enough." He raised an eyebrow. I kissed his cheek and left him standing there. That afternoon, Marla called. "We've verified the trust transfer," she said. "He has no standing to contest. We're also flagging new financial activity. He's been moving small amounts into a separate account." I didn't respond right away. "Elena," she continued, "this is the point where most clients start to unravel, where it feels like the betrayal gets heavier." I closed my eyes for a second. "It doesn't feel heavier," I said. "It feels clearer." That night I lay in bed, the city lights spilling soft shadows across the wall. The baby kicked once, then again. I pressed my palm gently there. "I'm not afraid," I whispered. Because I wasn't. Not of her, not of him, not of what was coming. I had the power now. She just didn't know it yet. But I wasn't always like this. There was a time I was soft, unguarded, when I thought love meant always forgiving. That version of me, she still lingers in the past. And her story begins with a morning on the beach, and a man who promised he'd never leave. You were 28 when he first said forever. It was early morning on Folly Beach, fog still clinging to the water's edge, the horizon a faded watercolor of gray and pink. You wore a navy sweater over your bathing suit, toes dug into the cold sand. He stood beside you barefoot, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Back then, James had a way of making the world quiet. He never rushed. He didn't fidget or check his phone. He just stood there looking at you like nothing else needed to exist. "You always overthink," he said that morning, handing you the coffee. "But one day you'll trust that I mean it. Mean what you asked." He smiled. "This," he said, touching your shoulder, his thumb brushing against your collarbone. "All of this. Forever." You believed him, and that was your first mistake. Now, a decade later, I stood in the kitchen of our condo making tea, while the dishwasher hummed behind me. The window was cracked slightly, letting in the Charleston spring air, warm and salted, carrying the sound of gulls from the harbor. James came up behind me, his steps quiet. I didn't jump. I heard him long before he got close. but still when he placed his hand on my shoulder, something in me pulled inward. It wasn't fear. It was the chill that comes from remembering a touch that once meant warmth. Now it meant calculation. "You okay?" he asked softly, his breath brushing my ear. I nodded, just thinking. He didn't ask what about, just squeezed my shoulder once and walked away. Later that morning, I found myself staring at the photo again, the one from that beach trip 10 years ago. We were laughing, holding hands, the ocean behind us. My eyes were closed in the picture, mid-laugh. I didn't remember what he said to make me laugh. I did remember how safe I felt. It's strange how you can miss someone who still shares your bed. I called my sister that afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you." I didn't tell her the whole truth. I wasn't ready yet, but I needed to speak to someone who remembered who I used to be. "I was just thinking," I said slowly. "Do you remember that time I called you from the beach and said I thought James might propose?" She laughed softly. "God, yes, you were shaking." "I wasn't scared," I said. "I was sure." "Yeah," she said. "You were." There was a pause. Then, "Why are you asking now?" I looked out the window at the skyline soft against the afternoon light. "I don't know," I whispered. "Just remembering." That night, James brought home takeout. He kissed my cheek, unpacked the containers, poured me a glass of sparkling water with lemon. "We're okay, right?" he asked out of nowhere. I looked up. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "You've just been, I don't know, distant lately. I don't want you to feel like I'm not here." I let the silence stretch for just a second longer than comfort allows. Then I smiled. "I know you're here, and I meant it. Because sometimes someone being present is the most dangerous part." After dinner, I sat alone in the nursery. The walls were still bare, the crib still in its box. We'd been waiting for the right time to set it up. I stared at the unopened mobile still in the shopping bag, tiny felt animals frozen in mid-leap. Then I whispered aloud, "I won't let you grow up watching me shrink." The words surprised me. They didn't feel dramatic. They felt inevitable. The next day, Marla called again. "Elena, there's movement. He's transferred another $3,000 into a second account. We're flagging it." I nodded, staring at the window. "Thank you," I said. Then I paused. "There's something else I need to do." That evening, I called my OB, scheduled a follow-up for a mild cramp I didn't have. Not because I was worried, but because I needed the paperwork. A clean, clear medical file. Something that documented the stage of my pregnancy. Something I could refer back to, if needed, if anything happened. James was in the shower when I opened his briefcase. I'd never done that before, not once. Inside, I found 3 things that mattered. 1. A printed itinerary for a weekend in Hilton Head. 2. A receipt for a dinner I didn't eat with him. 3. A small white envelope with the firm's logo sealed but unmarked. I didn't open it, not yet. But I photographed everything, stored the images in a new folder, subfolder travel records. Then I put everything back exactly the way I found it. After he fell asleep that night, I stood by the window again. Charleston's skyline glowed faintly in the distance, less like a promise, now more like a question. Did I ever really know him, or did I love a version he performed just long enough to win me? There's a part of every betrayal that feels like failure, but it's not the betrayal that breaks you. It's the shame of not seeing it sooner. And I was done carrying that shame. The next morning, I finally opened the envelope from his briefcase. Inside was a handwritten note. Not from James, from her, for when you need a break. Just us this time. Don't tell her. It was dated a week before the gala. That's when I knew they weren't just careless. They were confident. And that confidence would be the blade I'd sharpen. But first I needed to understand her, who she really was, so I did something I never thought I would. I asked her to meet me. Alone. The coffee shop was quiet, an old converted train depot, with exposed beams, soft jazz playing low, and the kind of light that makes everything feel like a memory. I chose the table in the corner near the window where I could see the street, but no one could see me unless they looked hard. I arrived 20 minutes early because I needed to sit with the stillness, to remember who I used to be before all of this started. I ordered chamomile, no caffeine. She walked in right on time, Danielle. Red lipstick, beige blazer, high heels that tapped out a rhythm of ease and entitlement across the tile floor. She spotted me immediately, her mouth tightening before she smoothed it into something resembling a smile. "Elena," she said like my name was a polite surprise. I nodded. "Thanks for meeting me." She sat across from me, legs crossed, handbag perched on her lap like a shield. I could smell her perfume, something floral and too sweet. A scent I'd found once on James's collar and told myself was probably mine. I wasn't sure why you wanted to meet, she said, lifting her cup, but I figured it must be about work. I let the silence rest a beat too long. No, I said gently, it's not about work. She blinked. Oh, she said. Well, then I didn't smile, but I kept my tone calm even. I just wanted to clear the air, woman to woman. Her eyes narrowed barely, but I saw it. A flicker of suspicion beneath the smooth surface. Elena, she said slowly, is something wrong? I tilted my head slightly like I didn't already know. You know, it's funny, I said. I was looking through an old box the other day, from before James and I were married, and I found that birthday card you wrote me. That got her. She blinked, tried to recover. Oh, she said with a small laugh. That's right, back when I was still new. You two had just gotten engaged. You called me luminous, I said. Said I brought him calm. Her smile faltered just slightly. I meant it. Did you? Now the pause stretched longer. She shifted in her chair. Elena, what is this? I leaned forward. I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to accuse you. I just want to understand. A beat. I want to understand why. For a moment she said nothing. Her lips parted, then closed. Her fingers drummed against her coffee cup. And then she gave me the only thing I didn't expect. Honesty. At first she said, voice low, it was just flirting. I didn't even think about it. James, he made me feel seen. And then I started hearing things. About how distant you were, how tired, how the marriage had gotten quiet. She shrugged, eyes sliding away from mine. He made it sound like it was already over. I let the words hang in the air between us. I was pregnant, I said softly. She blinked. Didn't answer. You knew that, didn't you? She looked down. Yes, she said. But by then, it was already happening. That's when something in me broke, not from pain, but from understanding. She didn't see what she'd done as cruelty. She saw it as inevitable. A woman like me, quiet, soft-spoken, composed, was forgettable to someone like her. To someone like him. And that was her mistake. Because people like me, we don't yell, we remember, we collect, we wait. I finished my tea, then reached into my bag and pulled out a single photo. The one from James's office window. The moment she touched his shoulder. Her laughter frozen mid-frame. I placed it gently on the table between us. She didn't touch it. Didn't need to, her face went still. Why now, she asked. I looked at her. Because this isn't a threat, I said. It's a courtesy. She swallowed. Her throat worked hard around the motion. You think I don't know what he tells you, I continued. But I do. I know when he lies. I know how he lies. Then with quiet precision, and I know that you struck me in his office, while I was carrying his child. She froze. I saw the blood drain from her face. I didn't, Elena? I didn't mean I'm not here for an apology, I said. Calmly, I stood, slid the photo back into my bag. You'll hear from my lawyer soon, and from the firm's board. She stared at me. Why are you doing this? I paused. Then whispered the truth. Because I once thought you were my friend. I walked out into the soft afternoon light. The sky above Charleston was pale blue streaked with clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician was playing something slow on a saxophone. I stood on the curb and let the breeze move through me. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. That night I updated the journal again. Date April 26th, entry confirmed emotional and physical affair. Verbal acknowledgement. Evidence confrontation successful. Subject responded with partial admission. Legal next steps initiated. Motif logged. Photo confrontation. Final use of birthday card. Fire metaphor. Loss of former warmth. Document expansion. Added transcript summary. James didn't come home until after midnight. He looked tired, shaken, but he didn't say why. And I didn't ask. Because I already knew. Danielle had told him. And now they were both afraid, but they still didn't know one thing. What happened inside that office? The strike, the push, the fall? It wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. And the next time I saw her, it would be in front of law enforcement. The bruise didn't show up until the next morning, just below my ribs, soft and dusky like a shadow blooming beneath my skin. I touched it gently, not because it hurt, but because it reminded me that it happened, that I hadn't imagined it, that her hands once used to type his emails and smooth her skirt before meetings had found their way to my body in violence. I was 26 weeks pregnant. and she had pushed me. It happened the day after I met her at the cafe. I hadn't planned to go to the office, but the silence that followed that waiting was loud enough to pull me there. James had been avoiding me since the confrontation. His texts were shorter, his voice too calm. The guilt was starting to show, but not in apologies, in evasiveness. I told myself I was just going to drop off the signed refinance papers for the condo. I didn't call ahead. I just drove, parked, walked up the stairs like I had 100 times before. I should have known she'd be there. The office was mostly quiet. Friday afternoon, half the staff already gone. I nodded to the receptionist, smiled faintly. Walked straight to James's door. It was open. He wasn't there, but she was. Danielle stood near the desk, her back to the window, a file in her hand. She froze when she saw me. "Elena," she said, almost breathless. "You can't be here." I closed the door behind me. "I won't be long." She moved forward quickly, too quickly. "If you're here to make a scene, I'm not," I said quietly, but something in my voice must have reached her because her face twisted. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You don't get to act innocent now," she snapped. "You think I'm the problem? You have no idea what he tells me about you." I didn't flinch. "I think you should move," I said softly, "before you say something you'll regret in front of a court." That was when it happened. She lunged. Not with intent, maybe. Not with full strength. But her hands came toward me. She shoved not hard, but quick, without thinking, without control. I stumbled backward. 1 step. 2. My back hit the edge of the desk behind me and I gasped. The air left my lungs as I twisted to protect my stomach. My elbow caught the corner. Silence. Just for a second. Then her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. I didn't mean I didn't speak. I just stood, straightened my coat, put one hand on the edge of the desk, the other over my stomach. The baby moved. Thank God. Then I walked past her, calm, slow, opened the door, and left. I don't remember walking to the car. I don't remember the parking lot, the engine, the drive, only the cold. It filled me like water rushing through cracks. At the ER, I told them I fell. They asked if someone pushed me. I paused, then said, yes. The doctor was kind. The nurses even more so. They ran the tests, checked the baby, everything looked normal. "Your blood pressure's elevated," the doctor said gently. "But the baby seems okay. We'll monitor you for the next few hours just to be safe." They gave me a quiet room with a reclining chair and dim lights. I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall and listened to the sound of the monitor, steady, rhythmic. My child's heart beating inside me like a promise. At some point, Marla arrived. She didn't speak at first, just sat beside me, held my hand. "I have to report this now," she said quietly. "There's no waiting anymore." I nodded, and said only one word, "Yes." Later the officer came. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm. He took my statement, asked for details, asked if I had witnesses. "I don't," I said. "But we do have hospital documentation," Marla added, "and a prior pattern of harassment, including emotional intimidation, digital evidence, and motive." The officer took it all, calm, professional. Before he left, he looked at me. "We'll need to contact her, and your husband." I nodded again, then whispered, "Be careful, she plays innocent very well." James didn't show up at the hospital until nearly 11 p.m. He looked disheveled, pale, panicked. "Elena," he said breathlessly, "what happened?" I looked at him from the hospital bed, one hand resting lightly over the fetal monitor strap. "She pushed me," I said. "In your office." His face went white. No, he stammered. She wouldn't do that. You must have misunderstood." I turned my head, met his eyes. "I didn't fall, James. She pushed me." He looked down, hands shaking slightly. "She didn't mean it," he whispered. And that was when I knew. He had chosen, not just her, but her version of the story. The nurse came in gently, telling him visiting hours were over. He left without arguing, didn't even look back. At 3 a.m., I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The baby kicked again. Steady, strong, I closed my eyes and said aloud just once, "You're not going to grow up thinking this is what love looks like." The next morning, I was discharged with a medical note, an injury report, and a recommendation to avoid stress. Too late. But I smiled anyway, because I had everything I needed now. A hospital record, a police report, a motive, a witness, me. At home, I opened the folder. Subfolder Assault Documentation, ER Visit Summary, Photo of bruise, Police Case Number, Email confirmation from Marla. I added one more line to the journal, date April 28th, subject physical assault confirmed, charges pending, emotional response steady, objective secure custody, finalize asset protection, prepare court entry. James didn't come home that night. Danielle didn't answer her phone, but that didn't matter, because the next time I saw them both would be across from me in a courtroom, and the judge wouldn't need to hear everything, just enough to see what I'd seen from the very beginning. That some people don't break you, they reveal you. Hospitals have their own kind of silence. Not empty, just heavy, like every room is waiting. For news, for sleep, for someone to come back. The walls hum faintly. The monitors pulse in slow rhythm. And somewhere in the hallway a nurse's shoes squeak softly across linoleum. But in my room that morning there was only stillness. I was sitting upright, wrapped in 2 blankets, staring at the cup of ice chips melting on my tray table. The sun had started to rise behind the blinds, casting soft amber lines across the floor, like light trying to find its way back into the world. The baby was safe. That's what the doctor said. And I had never been so grateful for anything in my life. But I wasn't okay. Not yet. There's something about being hurt by someone you once trusted so completely, someone who once ran his thumb across your lower back while you brushed your teeth, someone who picked up your favorite soup when you were sick and knew exactly where you kept your extra hair ties. When that person doesn't show up, it doesn't just feel like a betrayal, it feels like extinction, like something sacred has been erased. James never came back to the hospital, not that morning, not that day. He sent a message. "I'm sorry you got hurt. I'll check in later," that was all. 12 words. None of them asking how I was, none of them asking how the baby was. Just a quiet retreat, as if the entire weight of what happened could be smoothed over with a vague apology and a promise to check in. I didn't respond, because I wasn't angry, I was done. Marla arrived again at noon. She brought with her 2 things: a soft cardigan from my house and a file folder marked civil suit filing, intent to proceed. I looked at her. Are we really doing this? She sat beside me, calm as ever. Elena, she put her hands on you while you were carrying his child. There's a police report, hospital documentation, a paper trail of prior aggression, and now silence from both of them. She paused. Do you still want to protect him? I looked away and whispered, no, we filed that afternoon. Charges: assault of a pregnant individual. Accompanying claim: intentional infliction of emotional distress. I went home with the hospital band still on my wrist. The house was cold. I hadn't noticed how quiet it was until I walked through the front door and didn't hear anything. Not his voice, not his phone calls echoing down the hall, not even the hum of the TV left on. He'd been gone for 2 days. No note, no explanation, just absence. In the nursery, the unopened boxes sat exactly where I'd left them. The crib still in its packaging, the baby monitor untouched. Tiny onesies folded neatly in a drawer that hadn't been opened in weeks. I stood there for a long time, one hand resting on the edge of the crib box, the other across my stomach. Then I whispered, "You're not going to be born into this." That night, I moved everything into the guest room. All the documents, the laptop, the notebooks, the photos, the recordings. Every piece of evidence I'd quietly collected, filed, time-stamped, and labeled. I arranged them on the bed, one line after another. The story of a marriage unraveling in slow motion, a story no one had seen from the outside because I'd never screamed. I'd never made a scene, I'd just watched. And now the silence was my strength. The next day my phone rang. It was Danielle. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice trembling beneath carefully measured sentences. Elena. I never meant to hurt you. It was a moment and I don't know what happened. Please, can we talk? Woman to woman? I played it once, then deleted it. James called that night. I answered this time. Elena, he said, his voice dry. I need to come by and get a few things. I was silent for a moment. You can send someone, I said. Elena. I don't feel safe with you here. His breath caught on the other end. I didn't push you, I know, I said. Then why? Because you let her. The line went quiet. Then you're going to destroy me over a mistake. I looked around the empty room. The soft glow of the nursery nightlight still on. The calendar on the wall, a half-erased due date written in faint pencil. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. And then I hung up. Marla filed the protective order the next day. Danielle's name first, then James's. Civil, not criminal. Just enough to bar them from approaching my home or my body again. The documents arrived by courier. I signed every page with steady hands. That evening I sat outside on the patio with a blanket over my shoulders and a cup of warm milk in my hands. Charleston's sky was a dusty rose fading to violet. Somewhere church bells rang the hour. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of the wind. I hadn't cried yet, not once. I wasn't holding it in. There was just nothing left to cry for. Because I didn't lose a partner. I lost an illusion. And sometimes, that's the cleanest kind of ending. But there was still one more step. The deposition. The custody hearing. The quiet dismantling of everything we built on borrowed promises. And I would walk into that courtroom with one thing they never saw coming. Documentation. The courthouse smelled like old wood and paper. There's something about entering a building designed for judgment that forces you to walk a little slower. The heels of my shoes echoed gently against the polished tile as I stepped through the metal detector, clutching a slim leather folder tight against my chest. Marla met me just inside the hallway. She wore a navy blazer, her expression calm, her words measured. "They're here," she said quietly. "And so is their attorney." I nodded. There was no trembling in my hands, no adrenaline rushing through my chest, just clarity. The deposition was being held in a glass conference room 2 floors above the main courtroom. It wasn't dramatic. No judge. No reporters. Just attorneys' statements, evidence. But as I stepped inside and saw them sitting across the table, something cold moved through me. Danielle didn't meet my eyes. James did. For a second it almost looked like he might speak. His lips parted, breath caught in his chest. But I didn't let him. I sat, unfolded my documents, and began. Marla opened with the dates, timeline, sequence of events. She laid it all out as if she were reading a ledger. April 16th, the email, April 18th, the office observation, April 24th, the gala encounter, April 26th, the coffee shop meeting, April 27th, the assault. Then she passed the folder across the table. Inside, screenshots, printed messages, medical reports, police report, photos of the bruise, Danielle's voicemail. James reached for the folder. Danielle grabbed his wrist gently, stopped him. "I don't need to see it," she whispered. But I did. I watched it all. I watched them shrink beneath the weight of their own choices. And I didn't speak once. When it was my turn to give my statement, I looked only at the court reporter. "My name is Elena Grant," I said. "I am 38 years old. I am currently 7 months pregnant. On April 27, 2025, I was physically assaulted by my husband's executive assistant in his office. I have included medical evidence, law enforcement documentation, and digital correspondence to verify the sequence of events." I paused. Then I added quietly, "I am seeking full custody of my child, sole decision-making authority, no shared access, and I am petitioning for restraining orders against both individuals for the duration of the custody process." Silence. Not dramatic silence, final silence. Like the room itself understood that what had been broken could not be repaired. Danielle's lawyer whispered something to her. She nodded. Her eyes flickered once toward me, but I didn't return the look. James stayed quiet. Marla closed her folder. "We'll see you in court." Outside the courthouse, the wind was warm. Charleston's skyline shimmered behind a soft veil of cloud. I took off my shoes and walked barefoot for a moment across the grass near the front steps. A quiet kind of reclaiming, a reminder that I still knew how to feel the earth beneath me. That night I packed a bag. Not for me, for the baby, the first one. Soft white onesies, a light blue blanket, a tiny unopened book of lullabies I'd been saving, because soon the fight would be over, and I needed to be ready to begin. 2 days later, Marla called. "They're not contesting full custody," she said. "They're offering to settle quietly. No visitation, a lump sum payout, and release of all parental rights." I didn't speak for a moment. "Elena," she said gently, "you've already won." I asked her to email me the papers. Then I opened my laptop. Folder final motions. Custody agreement draft. Release of rights. Settlement proposal. Court acceptance filing. I added one more document. A single scanned page from a handwritten letter, Margaret's letter, because her choice is what made all of this possible, her trust in me, not just in the legal sense, in the human sense. She saw who I was long before I did. That night, James texted, "She's gone. I never meant for it to go this far." I didn't respond, but I looked down at my stomach. The baby shifted gently as if reminding me, "You don't owe anyone anything anymore." I whispered back, "I know. We're safe now." I printed everything, bound it. One copy for my lawyer, one for me, one for the baby someday when the questions come. And I wrote one line across the inside cover. "This is what it looks like when a woman protects her silence long enough to make it unbreakable. Because next week, I'll walk into that courtroom alone, but I won't walk in empty. I'll carry every lie they told, every document I saved, every bruise that faded but never disappeared, and I'll walk out with something they never thought I'd fight for: my future." The courthouse doors opened, heavy oak and brass, the kind that creaked faintly with memory. I walked in alone, no hand on my back, no arm at my side, just the soft sound of my flats on tile and the even rhythm of my breath. Marla was already inside. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She just stood when she saw me and nodded. That was enough. The family courtroom was smaller than I expected. Intimate, quiet. A judge behind the bench, two long tables facing forward, the seal of the state above everything like a watchful eye. James sat to the right, alone, his lawyer beside him. Danielle wasn't there. She'd waived appearance. Her name was on the documents, but her presence wasn't required. Maybe she thought absence would absolve her. It didn't. When I sat down, James looked at me for the first time in weeks. Really looked. His eyes were red not from tears, but from exhaustion, or shame, or fear. Maybe all three. But I didn't look away, because I had already survived the worst part. This was just procedure. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then it began. Marla was measured calm. She presented the custody petition with the confidence of a woman who'd already closed the case in her head. She listed everything clearly: verified assault report, hospital documentation, prenatal care timeline, absence of paternity support, settlement agreement signed and submitted. Then she handed over the file of evidence already reviewed by opposing counsel. "We are requesting sole custody, Your Honor," she said, "with no visitation rights. The father has voluntarily surrendered parental claims, and the respondent, known as Miss Danielle Lyons, has consented to a restraining order. Both parties have agreed to the terms as a condition of civil non-prosecution." The judge glanced at the file, then looked at me. "Ms. Grant," he said, "do you understand the terms of this agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you entering this agreement voluntarily?" "Yes." "And is the child due within 8 weeks?" I nodded. 7 now. He studied me a moment longer, not coldly, just carefully, then he signed. With a single stroke of his pen, he changed everything. The court record now read Elena Margaret Grant, sole custodial parent. Father rights surrendered. Incident record filed, sealed. James didn't say a word. When the hearing ended, he stood. For a moment I thought he might walk toward me. Instead he left, quietly, like a man who realized the fire he lit had burned down everything he was standing in. Outside, Marla and I walked together down the courthouse steps. It was raining lightly, a warm spring rain, the kind that smells like stone and memory. I stopped at the bottom. She looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded, yes. Then I smiled. Not a victory smile, not defiant, just peace. That afternoon I went home and unpacked the nursery, not rushed, not emotional, just present. I opened the crib box, built it myself, hung the mobile, folded the clothes, placed Margaret's letter in a small wooden frame, and set it on the dresser. Then I sat down in the rocking chair, hands on my belly, and finally allowed myself to breathe. Not brace, not prepare, just be. At dusk I walked to the waterfront, alone. The Charleston skyline shimmered through the mist, silver and soft, distant and quiet. I took a photo of it, framed it on my phone. The same skyline that once stood behind our wedding photos. Now it looked different. Now it looked like freedom. I printed that photo later, put it in a new frame on my nightstand. Beside it, I placed one last item, a closed file folder, labeled "Done." Not because I needed to reopen it, but because someday, if my child ever asks me where we came from, I'll be ready to tell the truth, with precision, with peace. Because I didn't just walk into court alone, I walked out whole. It's framed now. Simple wood, no embellishments. Just the photo I took after the hearing, the Charleston skyline at dusk. The water catching the last light like glass. It sits on the dresser in the nursery next to a music box and a folded blue blanket. Some nights when the baby's kicking and the house is silent, I sit in the rocking chair and look at that photo. Because that's the day everything changed. Not when I caught him. Not when she pushed me. Not even when the judge signed the papers. That day, the quiet one, the free one. The house feels different now, not empty or lighter. The photos of us are gone, not burned, not smashed, just boxed, packed with the same detachment you feel when folding someone else's laundry. No grief, no nostalgia, just space. I didn't tell many people what happened, not the full version. I let them believe what they needed to, that we'd grown apart, that the stress was too much, that maybe he had made some mistakes but we were all just moving on. I didn't need them to know, because I knew, and because the story was already written, documented, signed, sealed. Some nights he texts, not often, just enough to remind me he still hopes the memory of him softens over time. Hope you're doing okay. Thinking of you both. Let me know if you ever want to talk. I never respond, not out of anger, out of peace. Danielle disappeared. I heard from Marla that she left the firm 2 weeks after the court date. Quiet resignation, no forward address. Her name doesn't come up anymore, not in conversation, not in public records. Somewhere out there she's starting over. And I don't need to follow that thread, because the part of me that once wanted revenge got something better. The baby came on a Tuesday, early morning, gentle rain outside. The hospital room was bright and quiet, with nurses who moved like they'd done this 1,000 times, and doctors who smiled without speaking too much. And when I heard that first cry, something cracked open in me, not with fear, with completion, like everything I'd endured had folded itself into this one sound. He's healthy, strong, dark eyes, quiet disposition. I named him Micah James. Yes, I kept the middle name. Not for his father, but because names hold history. And history deserves to be remembered, not rewritten, not erased, just carried differently. I wrote him a letter the night I brought him home. Not for now, for someday. I placed it in the back of the baby book. It says things like, "You were born in a house full of silence and strength. You were never the reason things fell apart. You were the reason I stood up." If you ever wonder what love looks like, look in the mirror. Now my days are simple. Feedings, diaper changes, soft lullabies. And sometimes in the stillness, I look out the window and watch the sun settle behind the skyline. Same city, new life. I still keep the folder, the one labeled Tuesday. It's in the back of my closet behind the winter coats. I haven't opened it since the court date, but I don't throw it away. Because it's not a reminder of pain, it's proof. That quiet doesn't mean weak. That calm doesn't mean unaware. That a woman with enough patience can build her case page by page while everyone assumes she's too soft to see clearly. One day when Micah is older, he might ask where his father is. I'll tell him the truth, not all at once, but carefully, with clarity and compassion and strength. The same way I lived it, because she didn't ruin me. He didn't destroy me. They revealed me. And now the only thing I carry from that past is this photo of a skyline. The night I walked away and chose myself. She didn't steal my dream. She sharpened it.